Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my review for the Book of Boba Fett, Chapter 3. So this was an interesting episode because they didn't have as much flashback, only a little bit, and actually for the first time in the season devoted most of the episode to the present day story. And I think in terms of what I'd been having some issues with in the series up to now, this episode definitely helped to kind of ease some of those sort of like fears potentially for where we're going, in that we're still continuing the flashback, which is good because there's still definitely some more stuff to cover. But this was the episode that finally kind of convinced me that, like, okay, there's a bit more going on in the present day than just, like, I think really basic kind of crime boss stuff. It still at its core is, you know, fighting for territory and all that sort of stuff. But I think because of what they did in some of the backstory elements in this episode, I think you can maybe get a sense for where they're going more with the character of Boba Fett now. So the most significant thing here is that in the flashback, the bit that we see that Boba goes out to negotiate further with the Pikes, which he kind of negotiated a deal with in the previous episode. But when he returns to the Tuskens, he finds that they've all been killed. They've been completely wiped out. So I think I more or less predicted this, that they do this, and that is that Boba effectively gets the clan, the Tusken clan there, killed. And I think that is the case because he went after a section of the biker gang, the Niktos, and stole their speeders to go after the Pikes. But he was underestimating, I suppose, how big that gang was. And while he was negotiating with the Pikes, he also wanted to avoid the biker gang. The biker gang is what actually killed, I suppose, effectively his new tribe. So I think they'll play on this as they go forward with the flashback, that moments like this is going to heavily inform why he's taking the approach that he's taking on Tatooine. And that ultimately, I suppose, the approach he's taking is that from his time with the Tuskens, he found a certain honor to the way that they do things. And as sort of, you know, effectively like original people on Tatooine since it became a desert, that is the way things should be on Tatooine, and it shouldn't be run consistently like a crime organization. And that's why he consistently kind of makes sure to be known as the daimyo, not like the crime boss. So again, there's a few little things that they still have to do to fully sort of connect the dots, but I think we're now at the point where, like, okay, he's on his own again. So now we're more or less caught up with a lot of the sort of Mandalorian kind of stuff, where he's going to track down his armor. He's going to, we have to find out, of course, how he met up with Fennec Shand, and connect a lot of those dots. Was he the one who directly saved her life, or did he bring her somewhere, that sort of thing? And why is she so loyal to him? Because that kind of hasn't really been, you know, explained or covered all that much. Because obviously, like, he used to be a bounty hunter, she's a bounty hunter, so she'd know who he is, but do they have a previous dynamic relationship or not? Which is interesting because obviously in the Bad Batch they had like Fennec, I think, encounter, what was it, Cad Bane. So, and then we know Boba and Cad Bane had encountered each other before. So I'm wondering like how they're gonna like cover that stuff. That's what I think the flashback still has to do. Then I suppose, you know, you have to find stuff like him getting the Slave One, the ship back, and just him. Why does he want to focus his attention on Tatooine? We know why he has a connection there now because of the Tuskens, but why specifically has he decided that, oh, I'm going to take over Jabba's place? So there's still a little bit of what's he really planning to accomplish here. Like, there's still that core thing of, come the end of the series, where is Boba going to be placed in the grand scheme of things? Is it just that Tatooine is no longer going to be considered this dangerous place run by gangsters, and that he's going to change the outlook and, you know, perception of Tatooine. So it's not that place where, oh, the Hutt's control here, don't go anywhere near it. You're risking your life to, no, maybe we can do something with this place. Because in the present day, what I like that they did here was that they played with, like, Boba's approach of trying to do things in the right way with respect, and the positives that it brings, but also the negatives that it brings. That it's not 100% one or the other. That he's being criticized for, I suppose, not being a strong leader in being the ruthless tyrant. But he's gaining some benefits from doing things the way he's doing it. So obviously the first one that we see in this episode is the watermonger guy comes and is saying that these youth thugs are stealing my water, deal with them. He wants them killed effectively, I think is what he really wants, or chased out of the city. But when he gets there, he actually listens to them. And that's the I think entire point Boba wants to make in all of this, that the mistake he maybe made with how the whole Tusken situation went and negotiating the deal was that he maybe didn't think about all of the consequences, especially because he's the only one really capable of negotiating the deal with them, and he didn't fully factor in all these other things. Here he actually makes the time to listen, see the full situation, and he gets a benefit out of it. In that he effectively solves the guy's problem, in that the youth are not going to be like there really anymore. They won't be stealing his water, so he solved that. Yes, Boba has now sort of forced him to sell the water for cheaper, but, you know, it might work out better in that he'll sell more of it. You know, something like that. It's a relatively reasonable request. I can't see that decision's overly backfiring on him, just because that guy didn't seem super significant, but because he listened to them, he gains their loyalty in the same way that he did the same thing effectively with the Gamorreans. He let them live. They're now 2 loyal bodyguards to him, and that's worked out well for him. Similarly, by the end of the episode, Chrysanthemum, the Wookie kind of bounty hunter guy, he lets him go at the end, even though this this Wookie tried to kill him. He just lets him go, and there's a sense of like, okay, this might work out well for him, and that I can see in a tough moment Chrysanthemum arriving back to help out Boba. Now, maybe not join the team like some of the other characters have, but, you know, just return the favor, kind of. Just because he seems like a relatively kind of significant, you know, character, just in terms of how, like, strong he is. I can't see that being the end of him, what they did here. Which I suppose brings us into the fight that that we got here. Obviously, the setup on it was a little bit weird, that the security, like, he just got through, like a Wookiee managed to sneak into Boba's, like, you know, chambers with his healing pod. That was a bit like, but you have more people now, but he still got through. But what I liked about it was that you saw that Boba, despite being taken completely by surprise by a Wookiee, a really powerful Wookiee especially, he didn't, like, any other character probably would have been killed immediately, but Boba was able to actually fight back, even though he didn't really have any of his armor on. He tries to grab little bits and pieces of it, but what I like is that the thing that's actually effective for him in the fight is that he grabs his gaffy stick, and when he actually hits Chrysanthemum with the gaffy stick, it actually hurts him. It's like one of the only things that Boba does that actually hurts him, and I like that they're getting across that this weapon that he gained through this new sort of character development he's gone through with the Tuskens is actually probably his best, like, melee weapon, that's able to, like, you know, to almost bring a Wookiee to its knees effectively. But of course, like, he was super vulnerable. He's still recovering. He's not at full power yet, Boba. Didn't have his armor on, any weapons. But the fact that he didn't get, like, horribly badly injured from being really heavily beaten by a Wookiee who was wearing, like, you know, effectively Star Wars like brass knuckles, the sort of energy kind of knuckles, was very intense. Of course, he gets out of it because we get to see the gang that he just gained the loyalty of in action. And I liked that they got across that because they have the sort of cybernetic augmentations, that they have a certain level of skill, and because they outnumber him, they can just do little bits of damage to sort of distract him from Boba. And then when the Gamorreans arrive, there's a little bit more sort of power on display, and then overall they are ultimately able to get him into the sort of Rancor area and capture him. So pretty good fight scene overall. And again, a lot of people are sort of criticizing the show for really heavily, like really beating Boba up and not really having him shown as being overly strong. But you have to also view it as he's now been like, he's had like 2 assassination attempts against him where realistically he should have been killed in both of them because they were outnumbered by people with like shields, the perfect, defense against him, and they still couldn't kill him. Here, they snuck a Wookiee into his chambers as he was defenseless, still couldn't do the job. The fact that he has survived this has to be noted. Obviously, you maybe wish that it didn't have to come to him nearly being killed, but he's showing that it's becoming less and less, worthwhile to even order an assassination attempt because he is gaining more people onto his side, and he's not being killed. And he's gaining more experience. So there's that other side of things as well, that this is a series. We're only like halfway through now. We're going to get to the point where they're doing more with Boba later on. So I think they will show him at more sort of peak powers later on. I'm assuming he'll be just a little bit more healed as we get to the end. And because I think they have ultimately held back on doing too much with him and his gadgets, his armor, even so far this season with the Tusken Raider, the Gaffy Stick, they've not done much with him. They've really like held back on him using the flamethrower outside of like that first episode a little bit, and the rocket, the jetpack was only used as like a little moment here. They're going to do that stuff later, but that's what we're doing here. We get the full sort of political situation on Tatooine of like, okay, since Jabba died, I like that they refer that it is a legendary event now. The sail barge disaster, what happened there is actually super significant, because it's obviously where like Jabba was killed, but it's also the incident that led to this path for Boba as well. So Bib Fortuna takes over, and I suppose Boba thought it was as simple as, well, Bib took over everything Jabba was doing. I killed Bib, so now I'm in charge. When actually, the way Bib was forced to run things to actually maintain any sense of power, he effectively had to just negotiate deals with the other sort of powers within the city. So it's kind of a 3-way or 4-way kind of power vacuum type thing, and that there's this group here. I think they mentioned like the Trandoshans. You've got this group and this group. And they're just getting across that like, okay, you have a claim here, but you really have to work on this. There's the twins. The twins arrive and they reveal that they're actually leaving. Their assassination attempt failed. They don't want war. It's bad for business, so they're going to return to Nal Hutta. And they give Boba a gift, a young Rancor, and we get the whole, like they did with the Tuskens. They're doing good world building of just like, here's a lot of stuff you never knew about the Tuskens, and here, Rancor, kind of significant monster from original trilogy. Here's some details you might not have known about the Rancor, of like, they really attach to the first person that they look at. So that's why the Rancor's wearing the sort of blinders. And so Boba is the first one that this Rancor sees. And he wants to eventually ride this Rancor. And he seems quite happy about that. So Boba's palace now has a Rancor for the Rancor pit, but I'm guessing Boba will more regularly go down there, and I'm guessing at some point towards the end of the season we're going to see him actually in action, going up against people on the back of a Rancor, and that's going to be his big moment to shine. He also mentioned that like I've ridden like creatures like much bigger than this, so that's interesting. So that was a fun little scene to just this random monster that you think is just a monster. Actually, you get across that there's this more sensitive side to them as well. That there's always more detail than you initially thought with this sort of stuff. After that, we get to, I suppose, the mystery with the mayor is probably the last big thing. And this is where, like, I'm still waiting to see how all this sort of plays out. In that they sort of reveal that initially that the mayor has no power. He didn't order the assassination attempt, which means that he's likely working with someone else. And then they revealed the mayor's actually working with the Pikes, who are like a new party separate than all the other ones that were mentioned previously as having a claim here. But they now arrive on the scene, I suppose, with the idea that the mayor is going to be roughly sort of in charge as a figurehead, but the Pikes ultimately will have control here. You still have, I suppose, Boba maybe wanting revenge against the Nikto gang as well. And they're the main players you're now dealing with, because I guess the Trandoshans did give tribute to Boba, so they seem to be like relatively neutral in this. So they seem to be playing with the idea like Boba versus the Pikes, and then the gang is in there as well. And it's interesting that the flashback does heavily link into those ones, in that the Pikes were the ones he tried to form the deal with, and they were ultimately going ahead with it because they're kind of fearful of the biker gang. So it's an interesting one to see how Boba will tackle this, in that they seem to be setting up, there's going to be action, battles happening coming up. So that'll be interesting. Which leaves, I suppose, the final thing as the speeder chase, that is getting quite the beating online from what I've heard. People not liking these multicolored bikes and the way they look. And I agree to a certain extent. I don't really mind the colors all that much. I think it's just that they look, they're way too similar to actual sort of like real world, choppers, basically. I guess that's what they're going for, the Star Wars version of that. But I think that it looks just a little too much exactly like it, just in a speeder bike form. And they should have made the design a bit more Star Warsy. The chase itself, I kind of go back and forth on, in that I get the point that people make of like, it seems a little slow and labored compared to like other chase sequences, but they can't have every chase sequence they do outdo other ones, and that this was never going to be the same level of intensity going through the streets of Tatooine here as the episode 2 chase sequence or other ones that we've seen. It just wasn't, because it's the major domo of the mayor driving the speeder, not like a trained assassin who knows how to drive really well. And then I think the problem is just that it either is trying to get across that he's actually a really good getaway driver, or it presents the idea that the bikes, which they were just talking about, how fast they're meant to be, aren't really as quick as you'd think, and that they make a little bit of work out of getting this guy. They do it in the end, and I get it. They wanted a big action set piece going through Tatooine, and that was fine. It's just, it's no pod race sequence. It's no speeder chase from other things. It was just a okay, in my mind, chase that we've seen before, similar type of action scene. Ultimately, like this gang, I don't mind too much. Like you need Boba to develop a group of people so that he has enough people behind him to actually oppose a potential army of Pikes, army of bikers, and so on. So you need to do that, and I think so far it's been pretty well done. again, we're only halfway through, so there's quite a bit to be done here. I'm guessing before we go to all out action, there'll be an attempt to negotiate some of this stuff, and this will probably be the real test of Boba here, how he deals with the Pikes now that he's in this position. If the Niktos have anyone to bring to the table, how does he deal with them, given what happened with the Tuskens? I'm other than that, not really sure what else is going on here. I think, like a lot of people, I'm probably waiting for some sort of a twist to happen in a way, for some really notable character that we know about to like show up and really switch things up. Because I think that's what that's what made the Mandalorian so strong. Ultimately, was that, especially in season 2, the main plot was good because you cared about the Mandalorian and Grogu, but they'd also include like, and here's Ahsoka. Ahsoka is potentially bringing Thrawn into the series at some point. That's significant. Last episode, here's Luke. Boba is in The Mandalorian. Those type of things. We're maybe not quite seeing that here in Boba Fett. Like, having the other notable characters make their appearances here. We'll see as we go forward if they do that. But, that's where we are. So I think that's basically everything I want to say about this episode. I'm still enjoying the Book of Boba Fett, absolutely. Anyone trying to say that the show is kind of bad, I think that's not a particularly strong take, I think. I don't think it's as good as The Mandalorian. There's maybe some things it's doing that's a little bit stronger because it's not so laser focused on like big arcs. It can do a little bit more world building, which is nice, on stuff like the Tuskens, on the Rancor. But we also are kind of maybe missing the big stuff. But I think it's developing Boba into a character who I think is very interesting. And I get it that some people are having a hard time grasping this iteration in a way of the character and how it connects to the Boba from the original trilogy. At least for me, I've never connected super strongly to Boba as the bounty hunter because I didn't feel he was all that much of a character. It was very much just cool look, bounty hunter, that's all there really is. I think he's characterized more by, his time on Kamino. The fact that we saw him in episode 2, that we've seen him in the Clone Wars. That's the sort of stuff that to me adds more to his character than just, oh, Darth Vader said no disintegrations, that must mean he's the coolest bounty hunter ever. Whereas, no, he was raised by Jango Fett, who, despite being sort of on the outs, I suppose, with, Mandalore and stuff like that, he was thought, I guess, some sense of that Mandalorian kind of, respect. And that, at its core, is who he is. And he's struggling with the idea of, like, he used to be a bounty hunter, and that was him following in his father's footsteps, but he realizes that potentially maybe that's what got his father killed, and he doesn't want to go down that road, so he wants to do things in a more respectful way and have a stronger legacy maybe than his father. I'm kind of waiting for something like that to happen, to really, for him to just, I suppose, state what his motivations are, other than just, I want to be the daimyo. I want to really know specifically why and what is your aim. Like I speculated earlier on, I'm thinking it's maybe just, in a way, like maybe to honor the Tuskens, like rule Tatooine with a respectful way that they would respect, or something like that, combined with other aspects that maybe he wants to do. But we'll see how he handles all of this and where we eventually get to. So that's the video. In the comments, let me know your thoughts were on the episode. But other than that, that's been it. Thanks for watching, and bye.